I found a great piece on Time magazine weeping over the Supreme Court. John Roberts' Supreme Court being too conservative. What caused it? Welcome to Doug in Exile. I'm Doug TenNapel. This is where the happy patriots are. We're going to read this article together. Time magazine, how liberal blunders handed the right the Supreme Court. Let's go. As the Supreme Court launches a new term, it remains dominated by a 6-3 supermajority that has ushered in one of the most conservative eras in the institution's history. In recent years, the justices have overturned key liberal precedents on abortion, gun rights, and the power of federal regulators, while forging a groundbreaking path in areas spanning religious liberty. These are all things that the Democrats hate. They hate religious liberty, presidential immunity, and other fields that have damaged the court's reputation and instigated calls for reforms. Now, those last two statements are opinion. That these things have damaged the court's reputation. I think it has actually greatly improved the court's reputation from being a radical leftist, unconstitutional liberal majority. And there aren't calls for reforms. It's the normal liberals crying over their permanent seating that they want to put on terms, change their permanent feature of the Supreme Court. Now, the biggest loser of all is Merrick Garland, because he was supposed to be one of Barack Obama's appointments. And Mitch McConnell awesomely delayed that and worked with Trump to get us this supermajority of conservatives. The lurch to the right is a culmination of a more than 50-year transformation. And most Americans are familiar with the latest chapters of that story. Senate Republicans, for example, used unprecedented tactics to prevent Democratic President Barack Obama from filling the Supreme Court seat of the late conservative Justice Antonin Scalia in 2016. So he wanted to replace him with a liberal, and he decided not to have mercy. They justified the move by claiming that a seat should not be filled in the final months of a presidential term. 4 years later, however, they flipped the position wisely, correct? That's how you play it, guys. That's how you have to act like, well, this is good politics, and rushed conservative Amy Coney Barrett through the confirmation process after liberal Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died months before the end of a Republican Donald Trump presidential term. Here's why I approve that one specifically. It's the left that claims that in diversity, equity, and inclusion, that diversity is only a matter of your gender and not your ideology. You know what I mean? If they go, look, we just need a black woman on the Supreme Court. Oh, then let's do a black female conservative. They're like, oh, no, we can't do that. You know what I mean? So the diversity never means skin color. The Republicans said, fine, you want a woman on the Supreme Court? You know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Let's replace that woman with a woman. Amy Coney Barrett, are you happy now? And they're all going, no, that a woman, we actually would take a man, you know, a gay man if he's liberal. Yet most Americans do not know that the seeds of this warfare over the court were not planted by conservatives in recent years, but by liberals in the late 60s. They did this. Democrats did this through a combination of hubris, miscalculation, and poor timing. They squandered a majority that could have remained intact for decades to come, giving way to the conservative counter-revolution that continues to dramatically reshape American law. The hubris was on full display when Lyndon Baines Johnson eyed the high court months after his landslide victory in 1964. Eager to extend the Warren Court's liberal jurisprudence and fearful that his great society might suffer the fate of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal initiatives at the hands of the conservative jurists, Johnson resolved to maintain the institution's ideological bent. To accomplish that task, he sought to do the impossible, remove a sitting justice to make room for his close friend and counselor, Abe Fortas. This is how Democrats do it. They change the rules, guys. Abe Fortas was a brilliant attorney renowned for winning the landmark case Gideon versus Wainwright, which expanded the Sixth Amendment's right to counsel to state prosecutions. In 1965, the news of Justice Arthur Goldberg's frustration with the court's tepid pace which couldn't match the rush Goldberg had felt as a former union negotiator and labor secretary, gave Johnson an opening. What that did was it exposed his radicalism, and it gave Nixon a reason to push back on him and really put the gas under the Nixon campaign to start giving Republicans more control over the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court itself has been mocked as the most liberal, even in my time. Like if you look at the 80s and the 90s, you know, Reagan appointed Sandra Day O'Connor. She was liberal. Okay, so conservatives sometimes would accidentally appoint a liberal, and G.H.W. Bush appointed, I think it was Souter. Anyways, bad picks. They ended up flipping and going left. Some would say even Justice Roberts is a bit of a squish. So even the conservative court that we have now is not like hyper conservative or anything like that. It's normal jurisprudence. They're not politicized the way the left is. The three leftists, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who actually is decent, Keegan, who I always thought was pretty impressive, and Sotomayor, who is the dumbest member of the Supreme Court and worst and most liberal and stupidest. Those three are largely discredited, and the Supreme Court is back in the land of sanity. I thank God for that. I'm so thankful that Merrick Garland got burned out of that position, or we'd be in big trouble by that duplicitous liar. So be thankful. What do you guys think in the next term? Which Supreme Court justice is going to retire? They're probably going to be conservative. Who do you think is going to retire on Trump's next term? I'm Doug in Exile.